Ma'am, I asked you a question. Do you live in this neighborhood, yes or no?
I'm walking my dog on a public sidewalk. Am I being detained, officer?
I'm conducting an investigation. Hand me your ID, now.
You have no reasonable suspicion. This stop is unlawful.
You're obstructing. Turn around, hands behind.
The body camera footage would eventually be studied by law professors at Yale and civil rights attorneys in Chicago. But on that crisp Tuesday morning in October, Officer Kyle Braden had absolutely no idea that the woman he was glaring at had signed more arrest warrants than he had ever executed. He didn't know that the calm, steel-eyed woman holding a dog leash had spent 25 years on the bench, presiding over the disintegration of families, the protection of the vulnerable, and the rigorous application of the law in the state's busiest family court. To Officer Braden, standing with his thumbs hooked into his duty belt, she was just a subject. A black woman in a neighborhood where the median home price hovered around $1.2 million. A woman who in his estimation didn't belong. Before we get to the arrest that would end a career and cost the city nearly $1 million, I need you to do something. If you believe that nobody is above the law, especially those sworn to enforce it, hit that subscribe button right now. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, your state, your city. This story is going to make your blood boil, but you need to see how it ends. It was 10:15 a.m. in Whisperwood, a sprawling enclave of manicured lawns and colonial-style homes just north of the city limits. The air was cool, the kind of autumn morning that required a light jacket and a brisk pace. Judge Evelyn Moore was enjoying her day off. At 62, Evelyn moved with the grace of a woman who had nothing left to prove to anyone. She was dressed for utility, not the courtroom's sturdy walking shoes, gray gardening trousers, and a nondescript navy fleece zip-up. Beside her trotted Barnaby, her 3-year-old giant schnauzer. Barnaby was a show dog, impeccably trained, heeling perfectly at her left knee, his lead slack. Evelyn loved these walks. They were her sanctuary away from the docket. In her courtroom, she dealt with the heaviest aspects of the human condition. Custody battles, domestic violence, restraining orders, the fracturing of trust. Here, under the canopy of turning maple leaves, there was only silence and the rhythmic click of Barnaby's claws on the pavement. She had lived in Whisperwood for 15 years. Her neighbors knew her. The mail carrier knew her. She was a fixture of the community, a woman who paid her exorbitant property taxes on time and kept her hydrangeas perfectly pruned. But Officer Kyle Braden didn't know the neighbors. He was 28 years old, a transfer from a rougher precinct downtown, and he had been patrolling Whisperwood for less than 3 months. He was bored. He was looking for something to do, something that felt like real police work in a neighborhood where the biggest crime was usually a noise complaint about a pool pump. As he cruised slowly down Sycamore Drive in his patrol SUV, he saw Evelyn. She was the only person walking on the street. To Braden, she stood out, not because she was doing anything illegal, but because she was a black woman walking a large, powerful dog in a neighborhood that was overwhelmingly white. In Braden's mind, the calculus was instant and prejudiced. Was she a dog walker? No, she wasn't wearing a uniform or carrying multiple leashes. Was she a resident? Unlikely, his bias told him. She looked too comfortable, yet too out of place in his narrowed world view. He slowed the cruiser to a crawl, trailing her for half a block. Evelyn noticed the car immediately. Years of judicial experience had given her a sixth sense for observation. She didn't turn her head, but she registered the vehicle's presence. She felt the weight of the gaze. She tightened her grip on the leash slightly, not out of fear, but out of readiness. She kept walking her pace steady, her eyes forward. She had done nothing wrong. She was exercising her constitutional right to travel freely on a public thoroughfare. Braden wasn't satisfied with just watching. He wanted to know who she was. He wanted to assert his presence. He convinced himself that he saw something, a violation, a reason, anything that would justify a stop. He pulled the cruiser to the curb about 20 feet ahead of her, blocking the sidewalk path slightly, a tactic designed to force engagement. He put the vehicle in park, but left the engine running. As he opened the door and stepped out, adjusting his vest, He had already decided how this interaction would go. He would ask questions, she would be submissive, he would run her name, and he would feel like he had protected the neighborhood. "Morning," Braden called out. It wasn't a greeting. It was a challenge. Evelyn stopped. She commanded Barnaby to sit, and the large dog complied instantly, sitting statue still. She turned to face the officer. "Good morning, officer," she replied. Her voice was calm, the same modulation she used when addressing an unruly attorney in her chambers. "You live around here?" Braden asked, closing the distance between them. He didn't smile. His hand rested near his belt, not on his weapon, but in the command presence stance taught at the academy. "I do," Evelyn said. She didn't elaborate. She didn't offer her address. She didn't point to her house 3 streets over. She answered the question and waited. Braden didn't like the brevity. He was used to people nervous talking, spilling details, trying to please him. "We've had some reports of break-ins in the area recently." Braden lied. There had been no reports. "Just checking on folks who are out and about. Do you have some identification on you?" Evelyn looked at him. She studied his nameplate. K. Braden. She looked at his body camera, noting the green light indicating it was buffering or recording. She knew the statutes of this state better than the man standing in front of her. She knew the Fourth Amendment case law by heart. She knew Terry v. Ohio. She knew Hybel. "Officer Braden," Evelyn said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming steelier, "I am walking my dog on a public sidewalk. Unless you can articulate a reasonable suspicion that I have committed, am committing, or am about to commit a crime, I am not required to identify myself. Am I being detained, or am I free to go?" Braden blinked. It was like a slap in the face. He hadn't expected a citation of case law. He had expected compliance. His face flushed. The power dynamic had just shifted, and he was scrambling to get it back. "I'm conducting an investigation," Braden snapped, stepping closer, invading her personal space. "And I'm asking for your ID." "And I'm asking for the articulable, reasonable suspicion for this stop," Evelyn countered, holding her ground. "Walking while black in a nice neighborhood is not a crime, officer, nor is it reasonable suspicion. This is about the dog." Braden pivoted, grasping for a straw. "We have leash laws in this city. I need to see the dog's license and your ID to verify ownership." Evelyn looked down at Barnaby, who was visibly leashed with a high-end leather lead. "My dog is leashed in compliance with City Ordinance 44B. His license is attached to his collar. You can see the tag from where you're standing. I am under no obligation to hand you my driver's license for a visual inspection of a dog tag that is clearly visible." Braden's frustration spiked. He was losing control of the encounter, and his ego couldn't take it. He wasn't thinking about the law anymore. He was thinking about winning. "Ma'am, you're becoming belligerent," he said, using the catch-all phrase bad cops use when citizens know their rights. "I'm giving you a lawful order. Produce identification, or I will detain you for obstruction." "That is not a lawful order," Evelyn stated, her voice projecting now, ensuring the microphone on his chest captured every syllable clearly. "You are attempting to manufacture a crime to justify an illegal seizure. I am refusing your request because it violates my Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable search and seizure. I'm going to ask you one more time. Am I free to go?" "No, you are not free to go," Braden barked. "You are detained." "For what crime?" Evelyn demanded. "Disorderly conduct and obstruction of a police investigation," Braden said, making it up as he went along. From the porch of the house directly across the street, the front door opened. Mrs. Gable, a 65-year-old retired school principal, stepped out. She had been drinking her coffee when she heard the raised voice of the officer. She knew Evelyn. They were in the same book club. She saw the young officer looming over the judge, and she saw Evelyn standing her ground. Mrs. Gable didn't yell. She didn't interfere. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her iPhone, and hit record. "I'm recording Evelyn," Mrs. Gable called out from her porch loud and clear. "I've got the whole thing." Braden whipped his head around, seeing the witness. For a smart officer, this would have been the moment to de-escalate, to realize that people were watching, to realize that this woman had community support. But Braden wasn't thinking smartly. He felt surrounded. He felt his authority crumbling. He turned back to Evelyn with a look of pure malice. "Turn around," Braden commanded. "Put your hands behind your back." Evelyn stared at him. She knew that resisting physically would give him exactly what he wanted, an excuse to use force. She knew the law was on her side, but she also knew that the law couldn't stop a bullet or a baton in the heat of the moment. She had to survive the encounter to litigate it. "I am complying under duress," Evelyn stated loudly for the camera. "I am not resisting. I am stating for the record that this arrest is unlawful and lacks probable cause." She dropped the leash. Barnaby whined but stayed in his sit command, looking up at his mistress with confused brown eyes. Evelyn slowly turned around. She brought her wrists together behind her back. Braden grabbed her wrists roughly, far more force than was necessary for a compliant 62-year-old woman. He slapped the metal cuffs on. Click, click. The sound echoed in the quiet street. He tightened them aggressively. "You're hurting me," Evelyn said calmly. "These are too tight. I have circulation issues. You should have thought of that before you decided to argue with the police." Braden sneered, pushing her forward against the hood of his car. He patted her down, his hands searching her pockets. He pulled out her wallet. "Hey, Mrs." Gable was running across the lawn now, still filming with one hand. "What are you doing?" "That is Judge Moore. You are arresting a judge." Braden froze for a millisecond. "Judge." But he shook it off. No way. Judges didn't look like this. Judges didn't wear gardening clothes. This neighbor was just trying to scare him. "Back up, ma'am," Braden yelled at Mrs. Gable. "Or you'll be next for interfering." "I am securing her dog," Mrs. Gable yelled back, effectively ignoring his threat. She grabbed Barnaby's leash. "It's okay, Barnaby. Come here, boy." The dog, seeing a familiar face, went with her, looking back at Evelyn. "Thank you, Martha," Evelyn called out. "Call my husband. Tell him to call Chief Harrison." "Directly." Braden shoved Evelyn toward the back door of the cruiser. "Get in," he ordered. He pushed her head down, guiding her into the hard plastic seat of the cage. The smell of the car hit her stale sweat and disinfectant. She had sentenced hundreds of people to ride in cars like this, but she had never been inside one herself. It was dehumanizing. It was cold. Braden slammed the door shut. He walked around to the driver's seat, adrenaline pumping through his veins. He felt powerful. He had taken down a problem. He buckled himself in, breathing hard. He didn't look back at her. He threw the car into drive and peeled away from the curb, leaving Mrs. Gable standing on the sidewalk with the dog, her phone still recording the retreating taillights. The ride to the precinct took 15 minutes. Evelyn sat perfectly straight in the back seat despite the handcuffs digging into her wrists. She did not cry. She did not beg. She did not ask where they were going. She utilized the right to remain silent that she had explained to thousands of defendants. She closed her eyes and began to draft the complaint in her head. 42 U.S. Code Section 1983. False imprisonment. Assault. Battery. Deprivation of rights under color of law. She memorized the timeline. 10:15 stop. 10:18 arrest. She memorized the officer's face in the rearview mirror, his smug expression, the way he was chewing gum, the way he tapped the steering wheel to the beat of the radio. Braden glanced back once. "Quiet back there now, huh? Not so many big words when you're in the cage." Evelyn didn't respond. She just stared through him, her expression reading absolute zero. They pulled into the sally port of the 4th precinct. The garage door rumbled shut behind them, sealing them in the concrete bay. Braden got out, opened the back door, and hauled Evelyn out. She stumbled slightly as her legs had stiffened, but she regained her balance quickly. "Let's go," Braden said, gripping her upper arm and marching her toward the booking intake door. They walked through the heavy steel doors into the processing area. It was a brightly lit room filled with the chaotic noise of phones ringing, radios crackling, and officers talking. At the high desk sat Sergeant Thomas Miller. Miller was 55, a 30-year veteran of the force. He was tired, he was close to retirement, and he had spent more hours in court testimony than he cared to count. Braden marched Evelyn up to the counter. "Got a 148, Braden announced proudly, using the code for resisting, delaying, obstructing. Refused to ID, disorderly in a residential area. Sergeant Miller looked up from his paperwork. He adjusted his reading glasses. He looked at Officer Braden, then his eyes slid to the woman in handcuffs. Miller's face went pale. His jaw literally dropped. He stood up so fast his chair rolled back and hit the file cabinet with a loud bang. "Officer Braden," Miller said, his voice trembling slightly. "Do you know who this is?" "Yeah, uncooperative female refused to—" "Shut up," Miller snapped. He walked around the desk, ignoring standard safety protocol, and approached Evelyn. "Judge Moore, Your Honor." The room went silent. The other officers processing paperwork stopped. The hum of conversation died instantly. Evelyn looked at Miller. She recognized him. He had testified in her court on a child welfare case 3 months ago. "Hello, Sergeant Miller," she said calmly. "I seem to be under arrest for walking my dog." Miller looked at the handcuffs on her wrists as if they were venomous snakes. He looked back at Braden, whose smug expression was dissolving into a look of dawning horror. "Get those cuffs off her." Miller ordered, his voice low and dangerous. "Sarge, she wouldn't ID, she was—" Braden started to argue. "I said get them off. Now." Miller roared, his voice echoing off the cinderblock walls. "You just arrested the presiding judge of the Family Court Division. Are you out of your mind?" Braden's hands shook as he reached for his key. He fumbled. He dropped the key. He picked it up. He unlocked the cuffs. Evelyn rubbed her wrists. There were deep red indentations where the metal had bit into her skin. "I need a camera," Evelyn said. It was the first thing she said after being released. "Your Honor, please come to the captain's office," Miller said, sweating. "We can sort this out." "No," Evelyn said firmly. "I want photos taken of my wrists right now, here, in the booking area, under the lights, for the evidence file." "Do it," Miller barked at a nearby officer who was holding a digital camera. Braden took a step back, looking like he wanted to vanish into the floor. She didn't show ID. I didn't know." "You didn't know the law, Officer Braden," Evelyn said, turning to face him. She wasn't shouting. Her voice was ice cold. "And because you didn't know the law and because you let your bias dictate your actions, you have just committed a felony. You kidnapped a federal official." "Well, state official, but the federal lawsuit will feel the same." Miller was already on the phone. "Get the captain down here, now, and tell him to call the chief. Yes, it's a code red. It's Judge Moore." Captain Reynolds arrived in 3 minutes. He was a man who prided himself on running a tight ship, and he looked like he was about to have a stroke. He burst into the booking area, took one look at Evelyn, rubbing her wrists, and closed his eyes in physical pain. "Judge Moore," Reynolds said, walking over with his hands out. "I am so incredibly sorry. This is a massive misunderstanding. Please come to my office. Can I get you water coffee?" "I don't want coffee, Captain," Evelyn said. "I want the preservation of evidence. I want the body camera footage from Officer Braden's camera pulled immediately and secured. I want the GPS data from his cruiser. I want the dispatch logs. And I want a copy of the booking sheet that was started." "We haven't booked you, Your Honor. There are no charges," Reynolds said quickly. "You're free to go. We can drive you home. I'll drive you home myself." "There was an arrest," Evelyn corrected him. "I was handcuffed. I was placed in a car. I was transported against my will. That is an arrest." You don't get to pretend it didn't happen just because you realized who I am. If I were a cashier at the grocery store, I'd still be in that cell, wouldn't I?" Reynolds didn't answer. He couldn't answer. "I'm going to leave now," Evelyn said. "My husband is on his way to pick me up, but before I go, I want the badge number of this officer." She pointed at Braden, who was standing in the corner looking at his boots. "Braden," Reynolds said, staring at the young officer with a look that promised professional oblivion. "Give the judge your business card." Braden walked over his hand, trembling. He handed the card to Evelyn. She took it, read it, and slipped it into her pocket. "Officer Braden," she said, "you have the power to take away a person's liberty. That is a sacred trust. Today you treated it like a game. You treated me like a suspect because of how I look. You are going to learn a very expensive lesson about the Constitution." She turned and walked out of the precinct head high. Her husband, a retired surgeon, was pulling up to the curb in their sedan looking frantic. She got in the car. As soon as the door closed and the privacy of her own vehicle surrounded her, the adrenaline crashed. Her hands started to shake. She took a deep breath, fighting back the tears of rage and humiliation. "Are you okay?" her husband asked, reaching for her hand. "No," Evelyn said. "I'm not, but I will be. Drive me to the office. I need to call Arthur." Arthur was the top civil rights litigator in the state. The lawsuit was filed 48 hours later. Moore v. City of Whisperwood et al. It was not a polite complaint. It was a scorched earth legal filing. It alleged violations of the 4th and 14th Amendments. It alleged racial profiling. It alleged a failure to train. It alleged battery and false imprisonment. But what terrified the city attorney wasn't just the lawsuit. It was the video. Mrs. Gable had uploaded her footage to the cloud, and her grandson had posted it to social media with the caption, "Cop arrests judge for walking her dog." It went viral overnight. Millions of views. The video showed exactly what Evelyn had claimed: a calm woman, a belligerent cop, and an arrest with zero probable cause. The comments section was a firestorm. The local news picked it up, then CNN, then the BBC. The city attorney called an emergency meeting with the mayor and the police chief. "We have to settle," the attorney said, throwing a file on the table. "We have no defense, none. He stopped her for nothing. He arrested her for contempt of cop. And she's Judge Moore. She knows the law better than we do. If we take this to trial, she will destroy us on the stand, and the jury will give her whatever she asks for." "Can we offer an apology and a donation?" the mayor asked weakly. "She doesn't want a donation," the attorney said. "She wants Braden's badge, and she wants policy changes." Discovery was brutal. Evelyn's lawyers demanded Braden's disciplinary file. They found a pattern. Over his 8-year career, including his previous department, Braden had a 400% higher rate of stopping black motorists than white ones. He had 12 citizen complaints for rudeness and excessive force, all dismissed by Internal Affairs as unfounded. Evelyn's team laid it all out. They weren't just suing Braden, they were suing the system that kept him employed. They argued that the department knew he was a liability and put him on the street anyway. 6 months later, the city caved. They agreed to a settlement of $850,000. But the money came with conditions. Officer Kyle Braden was terminated for cause. The termination letter cited gross misconduct, violation of civil rights, and conduct unbecoming an officer. The city agreed to implement a new oversight committee for police stops, one that required officers to document the articulable reasonable suspicion for every single interaction, not just arrests. Evelyn stood on the steps of the federal courthouse the day the settlement was announced. She was wearing her judicial robes not because she was presiding, but because she wanted to send a message. The press was there in droves. Justice was served today, Evelyn told the cameras. But let us be clear. Justice was served because I had the knowledge to assert my rights, the resources to hire the best attorneys, and the position to make them listen. If I had been a 19-year-old cashier or a single mother working 2 jobs, This officer would still be patrolling your streets, and I would have a criminal record for resisting arrest. That is the reality we must change. She didn't keep a dime of the $850,000. She used the entire sum to establish the More Legal Defense Fund, a nonprofit dedicated to providing top-tier legal representation for indigent citizens who had been victims of police misconduct. Kyle Braden never worked in law enforcement again. His name was added to the National Decertification Index. He moved back to his hometown in a different state working construction. He told his friends he got screwed by politics, but deep down in the quiet moments of the night he remembered the look in Sergeant Miller's eyes. He remembered the moment he realized that his badge didn't make him a god. Evelyn returned to her quiet morning walks with Barnaby. The neighborhood felt different now. The patrol cars that passed her drove slowly respectfully. The officers would wave. She would nod back. She wasn't afraid, but she was changed. She understood now in a way that no law book could ever teach what it felt like to have your freedom snatched away by a man with a gun and a grudge. She sat on her bench for another 10 years, retiring at 72. Every time a case involving resisting arrest came before her, she looked at the body camera footage herself. She watched every second. She looked for the escalation. She looked for the ego. She held the police to a standard of absolute perfection because she knew what happened when that standard slipped. The story of the judge in the handcuffs became a modern parable in law schools. It was a lesson about the Fourth Amendment, yes, but more importantly, it was a lesson about dignity. If this story resonated with you, if you believe that we need to protect the rights of every citizen, regardless of who they are, please leave a comment below. What would you have done in Judge Moore's shoes? Would you have stayed that calm? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that shine a light on the truth. The system only changes when we refuse to look away. See you in the next video.